Hey, Sarah, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Thank you, Brian. I am really excited to have this opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Sarah Anderson. I'm based in the great state of Texas, and I am passionate about helping those around me, including in my professional life, to empower them and enable them to be successful. And that, along with my competitive spirit, led me to the profession of sales, which I've been doing now B2B for over 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. What got you into it?
Well, as you may have heard from others, I think it wasn't my initial career path.
I see that.
when
Yeah.
I when I was a little girl, it's not what I wanted to be when I grew up. But I actually studied psychology and nutrition and was planning to go to a graduate level program, be a sports psychologist. And as so happens, life interjected a different path for me and put on my tennis shoes because somebody moved my cheese, and I realized I needed to get a job and pay bills, and leveraged my network. I was pretty young at the time, just out of college, and found a fantastic opportunity with a nonprofit where I learned that I really loved to get to know people, get passionate about something bigger than myself, and influence decisions that ultimately got me paid, to do it. So that's what started my career in sales.
And was it that curiosity from the psychology degree that helped you? Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot because I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg. It was my personality that drove me to psychology. I think who I am and what I see every day in my professional career is the curiosity. There's a part of me that has always been, I think since I was little, of being type A that I am, of being a problem solver.
Yeah.
So I think what came with that, if there was something ahead of me, challenging, little, small, my mind went to, okay, how are we going to solve it? What tools do we need to solve it? What questions do we need to ask? So I would say my curiosity from that psychology background, and a lot, I think, was the competitive environment that I was in sports. I think I've heard you say this before. I do see sales as a performing art. It's a performance profession, and I get paid to do it, but that's the result of my efforts and execution. But I think a lot of my attraction to sales was around competitive sports and that spirit I have. I like to win.
Well, that's it. And even psychology, at least therapy, the therapy side of it is a performance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
you may know what's wrong with somebody, but if you just tell them, now they know, but they probably already knew. But
Yeah.
it's more like, how do you solve it? How do you get them
Yes.
to want to solve it?
Well, and it's fascinating because I've been able to combine, and now that I'm raising children and have young adult children, and my youngest is will be an eventual woman in business. I try to relate, human life and the human experience, which I think is so important in selling. It goes back to human behavior. So it's been really cool that I've been able to combine my background specifically, and I don't mean to nerd out too much, but behavioral economic theory and driving behavior change. It's fascinating to me. And to your point, you can't just tell somebody to do something. I mean, I've raised kids, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You have to engage them, you have to inspire them, you need to make sure that they know what you want. But I think the missing element and what makes a really good person in a sales profession is that middle part where you can engage their emotion and how they feel, so that you can get them to do what you want them to do and drive that progression of engagement, if you will. Because if you don't humanize the experience, again, from my point of view, I don't think I have a secret sauce, but I do try to humanize the experience of selling. And that leads to feeding my curiosity and relating to them and being empathetic and really trying to figure out what they're there to solve for, and getting away from the I have a widget, do you want to buy one? So
Because
the
it is that
psychology backgrounds proved me well.
that cognitive empathy, being able to place yourself in someone else's position.
Yep.
And I bet parenting helped that.
I think it has a lot of personal challenges or experiences. I think I've been able to leverage what I've learned professionally. I'm sure we've all, being in sales, have taken those, 10 million different personality assessments, right? Depending on one, I'm blue, and the other one, I'm red. And, they put you in this box, right? But for me, it's having a deliberate consciousness around how I'm going to manage the emotion, because you can't wash it and you don't want to take it away, right? You just want to channel it. So I've had experience as a mom, and I've been, a young mom trying to succeed in business, and how can I leave my kid and go to work every day? I've been a single mom. I've now a blended family mom. And I have definitely taken some of that structure that I learned in the business environment over to my personal life. But a lot of times I'm taking the experience from my personal life, that resilience, that discernment and judgment that I think is critical when you're going to be successful, especially moving up into a global and enterprise sales environment that I'm in now. But I think I learned a lot of that, obviously making mistakes too,
Yeah.
but, as a mom and in my personal life.
Because you've had like paychecks. That's a tough sell, right?
Oh, great company too.
Yeah.
I was so thankful that that was early in my career, right? Which is what it was designed to. I think, you got a lot of the young pups that were eager and single and, high transactional, high activity, and develop and grow. But what a great start to really, I think, quench my thirst for competition. But I think there is where I really fell in love with the art of selling. And because you're right, it was like the competitive athlete environment. And I fell back on my dad, who was a college athlete and a military officer. So
Oh boy.
speaking of therapy, right? No, I'm just kidding. But, he would, in sports, I found at Paychex a very parallel, because though it was high activity and transactional, I got this fascinating insight to the mind of a business owner and who is their most trusted business advisor. And I learned early on to be strategic and be inquisitive, but be very structured. It was like the athlete, I'd been a figure skater, was one of the sports I was in. When I went to competition, the only thing, if you've ever watched it, you see is that couple of minutes choreographed to music, and that's all you see. You don't see the 3:45 getting up on the ice at 4:30, the falls, the injuries, the ballet classes, the ice time, the costumes, the training. So you kind of have that one moment, and Paychex was really great about laying that foundation to ensure that you were prepared and conditioned and at a competitive edge. And then that's where the personality took over to execute.
Yeah.
But learning about business owners' mindset, I think, was the best thing about working for a company like Paychex.
Well, I love that analogy because it is a lot like sales. We get that 3 minutes. Is that what it was? 3 minutes?
Well, depending on your level, yes, you only had a certain time that you could be on the ice, and you'd actually get penalized if you went over. So you got to be on
And
point.
right. And yeah, nobody sees it, but you knew how much energy went into the practice, the repetition, both the boredom and the physical strain. And when you're a teenager, getting up early is like miserable.
Oh, yes. Yeah, but it still is, honestly. But and it reminds me of, and I don't know if you've ever heard Simon Sinek's TED Talk on the golden, circle and the why. I think that was another element I learned early on in my career, because there are those days, when you get the no, or, you lose the RFP, or you've worked so hard, or you thought, those challenges and setbacks. And then the days, it's like climbing a mountain. You feel you've scaled half the mountain.
Yeah.
But then there's some days you're like, I'm just going to camp out for a while. This isn't going well. But there was something, and I think in the successful salespeople that I've tried to surround myself with, quit is not in their vocabulary, right? There's a relentless pursuit of excellence, not perfection. I definitely
Right.
think there's a difference. But, I would find myself taking little steps some days, big steps other days. But it really reminded me when I heard, Simon's TED Talk of, that's it. It's the why. Why do you get up, and why does anybody care? I mean, I could tell you what I do every day and whose name's on my W-2, but if I'm really going to empower and enable other people around me, or my customers, or my people that I mentor, or learn from my leadership, it's got to be about the why. And then I think the how you do it and what you do fall into place. But I think that's another really good analogy that he illustrated that I think is a great mindset.
Well, what was your why?
What was my why? I think it was that I want to help others. I want to win. I want to drive solutions and problem solve. And sales and all the industries I've been in, I've actually mainly been in, and it's probably because of this, more service related, solution oriented sales.
Yeah.
I've never, tactically speaking, sold a widget or a product, and my why was, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to solve their problem, and help their business. I mean, that's a good feel. Granted, I love people. Yes, I'm competitive. I want to make money. I mean, I'm not, a nonprofit, but for me, that was my motivator. And Paychex, American Express, I'm now an organization part of Accenture. What I love about all those companies, and even when I was at BI Worldwide, it was, what's important to you and how can we solve it? And if their business was successful, I succeeded as a community member and an individual contributor to society. I mean, I know that sounds really heavy, but I was like, I'm making a difference. And, the guy that delivered my kids, he was a client. My dentist was a client. We still eat every Friday night at one of my Paychex clients' restaurants. And I just found this beauty in fulfilling kind of my purpose in the professional world by thinking about what's my why, and the how I did it, and the hard work and the training and the reading the sales books and calling the guy that's number one on the ranking report, and listening to podcasts like yours. I was like, okay, that's how I'm going to get better. And then what I do is, outsourcing payroll services. But really what I was doing is I was, letting them live their dream of being the next Mrs. Fields. And I took care of all the, keeping him in compliance with the IRS or peace of mind. And I looked at what I did differently after I centered myself on, why am I doing this again? And I was successful at it. I mean, metrics wise, the outcome was being a top performer. Right. And I made money, and it made me want to keep doing it. So,
well, what I like about it is that why was about them, not you.
Exactly.
And
I
people
think
pick
that's
up on
that
that
empathy.
immediately.
Yeah.
Well, because when your why is solving their problem, people out of it immediately sense that you're here, and all of a sudden you're showing interest in them, not what you do and how it works and why it's better.
Yeah. And that's what people want, that ego part of the human nature. They want it to be about them, but you know what? It's mutually beneficial. Anybody in sales will tell you that. It benefits you too. So,
right. Because instead of the wrestling of, I'm going to convince you this is better, well, let's talk about you and what you want to achieve.
Exactly.
Gets them talking. Trust is built because your focus is on them. And
exactly.
Now, back to the ice skating, because I find that great, because I find the analogy moves really well.
Mhm.
because sales, it's probably 80, 90% preparation. You get so little time face to face talking with the other person to execute.
Yep.
And then what usually, if something goes wrong, people want to then repair it. It's
Yeah.
like, no, it has to, the time to
It's too late.
repair it. Yeah, right. If you
You're
fall
off
on
the
the
ice.
ice,
They've
right, you're
already
off
brought you
the,
the flowers and it's over. Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And it's not your interpretation of how well you did.
It's the judges.
Yes.
Yep. So, it all came down to, I got to give a little plug for my brother, because what got us into figure skating, kind of a fascinating story. So my dad was a physician. My brother's school came to him at my parents and said, we think there's something going on here. And my parents were like, no, he's a bright kid. Like, it's got to be something different. And my dad reached out to another person in the medical community, and my brother was diagnosed with dyslexia. And this was in the early 70s, and there wasn't a
They didn't
lot of
know what it
research
was.
around it. So the doctor says we're finding a lot of success in occupational therapy approach of focusing on things that require cross patterning and hand-eye coordination. So that got us into figure skating. We lived in Chicago at the time, and it was like tennis or figure skating. My parents were like, there's a rink down the street, we'll go there, right? So we got into figure skating. That became a family affair. My brother's actually the skating coach at the University of Delaware.
Wow.
He's won national championships. He's skated internationally, but that was my foray into it. And it is a lot of analogy, because as it wasn't just about the technical performance, because you've probably seen this, like let's relate it to sales, right? You'll get in an RFP, or you're in a competition with somebody else, and at the end of the day, you both
You
make the
both
widget.
skate.
You both, yeah, I mean, you both say that I got service and here's our great clients, and so let's just say in figure skating you land all the technical jumps, but if you've kind of watched the sport, or even when you see the performance and you add in what makes them unique and how do they speak through movement and music and outfit, and it's storytelling, and that is where I saw people that did better in skating, and those were the skaters I wanted to be like too. And so, I had the hair, and we got the right dress to match the music, and I was very particular. The music had to be authentic to me. It had to speak to me, or I wouldn't be able to get out there on the ice and execute
Yeah.
me. And I found in sales, I'm never going to be you. I'm never going to be the other guy that might be, top of the ranking reports. But if I can be authentic and listen, and there were tough days, and it taught a lot of discipline. Like with the sales, you've got to take the time to research and be organized. And those are things, they should be table stakes for anybody in business. And I realize that's challenging. And if you're not good at that, maybe this isn't the right profession for you. But yeah, it was how can I tell the story through technical elements, right? I've got to be able to deliver on what my client wants. But how can I weave it in and engage them for what they want that's going to speak to them, and win the deal accordingly, or win the competition,
Right.
because of all those things coming together.
Because it's completely subjective.
Yes.
Because when you listen to like the Olympics when they do it, the words they use, oh, the attitude, look at the energy. You know, how do you put that into an RFP? Right? That's a complete feeling that somebody's getting. They can't put, oh, it's not a triple axle, whatever you call it, right?
Right. That's a real jump. Good job.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and even if they didn't land perfectly, the smile and the energy, the things that the intangibles people connect with.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true with sales.
Yeah. And taking the tangibles and being able to differentiate them and translate them in to what your client wants. I mean,
Yeah.
I personally, especially in the global, more enterprise, because I've done everything, Paychecks was small, new business, high transaction.
Right.
I've done middle market enterprise, and then the global, it's like, you hate it, you get an RFP, but that's their process, right? Procurement or sourcing or is going to drive it. but their title, on LinkedIn isn't I'm buying things. I mean, that's,
VP of
and
stuff.
yeah, VP of stuff. I mean, there is an Internet of Things thing, which I did laugh when that first came out. I was like, really? You can get away with that? But yeah, the it's trying to navigate and find out. And I knew sometimes I'm like, do I have a champion there? Could I even tell you what what their buying style is? Do I have a way to get in there and guide them? Because they don't know. Procurement's going to look for, lowest margin, longest pay term. They're going to be
Yeah.
looking at their thing. The CFO's looking at his thing. The CEO or the head of sales, maybe, that put out the RFP, crazy. Sometimes they don't even consult them of what the solution's going to be. So, it's challenging to translate it into the story. And something that I learned later on in my career when I was doing more of these, which I think you do more presentations and big RFPs and longer sales cycles in the global space, was the discipline part. What are we going to say? What is our story going to be? What is it going to look like? Let's, like, even if we answered the first paper, if it's an airline, let's find out what is their mission, what's their vision. Let's style it. Let's have the visual, the language. Everything needs to speak to them.
Yeah.
It can't be our language as, a seller, so to speak, or a vendor. And I think, in skating, it's the same thing. It's like, I'm still being me, but how it lands on you is going to be, make you want to engage me, learn more, and influence you. So.
And there's not even the window of opportunity for the victim mentality.
Right. Yeah, you got to be proactive and take charge.
Right. You cannot say, oh, it's because I'm this, I'm that. They like jazz rather than rock. It's like, I've got to do what they want.
Yes.
And better than other people.
Yeah. Well, I heard you talk one time and I loved it. I thought it was spot on. It goes back to that locus of control.
There you go.
And people that have a sense of true self accountability.
Yes.
Because that is a pet peeve of mine, in anything, that making an excuse is, well, we could have, and it's like, you know what, then own that. Fix what you can, do what you can, take control of what you can control. And, sometimes you walk away, sometimes you lose. But that, I don't know if that's something you could even teach somebody. But when you have that right mindset, you're exactly right. It takes away any, at least, subjectivity as a seller to be a victim or lose because of anything that you could control.
Yeah. So. And it's kind of natural. You lose, you get hurt, you get rejected. It's natural. Your subconscious just protecting yourself.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But in sales, it has to be about, what can I control? What did I miss? What were they wrong for me? Were they wrong for the company? Was it the wrong time? And
well, I think a best practice is to debriefing. Sometimes I've learned more when I lose a deal. And doing it when you win too. I think a lot of people don't, right? They're like, we won, but that's where the real selling begins, right? The delivery, the execution. Is this going to be a referral source down the road? But I love to debrief. Yeah. Win, lose, or draw. I want to have candid, genuine conversations. I'm like, let me know. I mean, it could be that, the nephew's fiance works for the other guy. Like, I couldn't have controlled that. Okay, move on, But did I miss something? Did they flat out tell me something? Or was it a capability that we honestly didn't offer? Like, it's so important, I think, to your point, to debrief and understand, lick your wounds, have that resiliency that I think is a key element of a good salesperson, and move forward.
Because you got that in skating with the judges giving you a number. If you use that same analogy after each deal or after each call, how well was that an 8.9 call or was it an 8.7 call?
Yep.
And I bet on the skating, you knew what it was. You could feel it.
Yeah.
How often were you surprised when they pulled the numbers up?
Right, not often, especially
Right.
with, technical elements, or you were off. And it's funny, and maybe you've had this experience where you were, as an individual contributor in the trenches. I remember saying this once to one of my bosses. Um, I think it was early on when I was at Paychecks, but sometimes you'll leave a meeting and you're like, I could not have been more on. Like it was there. The vibe was there. The energy was there. You're like, that was like a dance of perfection, and in skating, I would call it, I'm in the ice, or I'm on the ice. Like when I would do performances where I felt like I was skating on the ice, I never really got into the edges and the technical aspect, but it impacted the whole skate. And I think it's like that. Either you get in the ice and you're in it and you get it, or you're on and you leave the performance and you're like, I was on the ice. I was not in the ice. Like they didn't get the best of me. And you know what? I'm probably not going to win that.
Yeah. I mean, I had this magical CEO at one time, and at the end of the quarter, I'd have him come out and we go to the deals that I was hoping to close.
Yeah.
And he would get into state, pounding his chest and like, tying his tie, untying it, tying it. But when he got up there, he was calm, he smiled, and he just flowed for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And
because he knew how to tell the story. He was a performer.
yes. And this is when I say performance, the natural thing is to sing and dance, but no, every communication, every interaction is at some level of quality. Every comedian, everybody who does it with other people. We're not engineers building something in a lab.
Right.
And
Right.
and I think that grading yourself after each performance, then you find the distinctions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're small. They're never huge.
Rarely. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's been some I'm like, oh, this is
Right.
what you
It's
want
like,
to do, Yeah, but yeah, you're right. It is. And I also think it's key to point out when we say it's kind of a performance industry, but so is, track and field and football and, sports. We watch those, baseball. Um, it's that's the genuine outcome of measurement at the end of the day, right? And I think another thing is really important is, because some people, the negative connotation of like sales or you're performing, that doesn't mean, we're making things up,
right. It's
or,
not phony.
it's not phony, it's
Yeah.
genuine, it's authentic. And I think a client can see that. I think they can sense that. And I know there's, ideas of, well, we can just box things and KPI things. And, to your point, you can't. You'll have people lie on their weekly activity reports is probably what you're going to get. If you say a top
You
performer
get
has 10 calls,
actors, the
then
bad kind.
then
That
you're
is
going
the
to get
faking.
somebody that magically has 10 appointments every week because they said that's, but their closing ratio is like they close 1 or 2 out of 10. It's like,
Right.
okay, I'd rather have somebody closing 4 out of 7 than 1 out of 10. Let's talk about that. But you got to be authentic. I think people do buy from people. You got to humanize the experience. They don't, and when it does become a paper thing or a commodity thing, that's where I think as salespeople, we need to be bold and have a certain pursuit or relentless thing of idea of excellence, that we've got to change the conversation. Because I use this term a lot, and I stole it from somebody else. So, but you can't give a haircut over the phone, So, and when I would start getting some of that, I'd be like, hey, hold on. And when you're early on, you don't sometimes have the fortitude to do that, because you're younger and you're not as experienced. But I'm like, hold on, I want to help you, but where you're driving this, I can't help you. I need to know more. I need to peel back. I can't give you a haircut over the phone. And you're asking me for a haircut, and I can't put that in a paper RFP. I can't. So,
But you're doing the same thing. You're showing that your focus is on their best interests,
it
which
is
is the
yeah,
key to trust.
I believe. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
Cool. This has been great conversation, Sarah. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Yes. So I am Sarah Anderson on LinkedIn. And like I said before, open to ever help anybody empower and be successful. And I hope I get some people reaching out to just stay inspired and engaged in the trenches that is sales. But yeah, it's been wonderful speaking with you, Brian. I appreciate it.